During decades, military archives kept this story in total secrecy. No soldier who participated wanted to talk about what really happened that night over Germany. But today, you're going to discover why. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel for more daily documentaries. Ready? Now, turn up the volume and let's begin. The war had entered its fourth year when the decision was made. The United States Army Air Forces had been suffering devastating losses over German airspace. Bomber crews called it the meat grinder. Military strategists called it unsustainable. In 1943, American bombers flying deep into Germany were being shot down at an alarming rate. Some missions lost more than 60% of their aircraft. Behind closed doors at the Pentagon, generals were beginning to question whether daylight precision bombing, the cornerstone of American air strategy, could continue. The answer would come from an unexpected source. A group of pilots that many in the military establishment had actively fought to keep out of combat entirely. This is the story of how the Tuskegee Airmen, known to bomber crews as the Red Tails, changed the air war over Europe and shattered prejudices that ran deep within American society and its military. The story begins at Moton Field in Tuskegee, Alabama, a small airfield built in 1941 specifically for a controversial military experiment. The United States military was segregated, as was much of American society. Black Americans served in separate units, usually relegated to support roles, cooking, cleaning, loading supplies. The idea that black men could become fighter pilots was considered absurd by many military leaders. One Army Air Corps report from 1925 explicitly stated that African Americans were mentally inferior and lacked the reflexes and judgment to fly military aircraft. Captain Benjamin Davis Sr., one of the few black officers in the Army, had been collecting these reports for years. His son, Benjamin Davis Jr., had applied to the Air Corps and been rejected because of his race. But war has a way of forcing change. Pressure from civil rights organizations, the black press, and a few sympathetic politicians led to the creation of what was officially known as the Tuskegee experiment, a program to train black pilots for combat. Many senior officers expected it to fail, wanted it to fail. Documents declassified decades later would reveal that some commanding officers were ordered to ensure that black cadets washed out of the program. Lieutenant Colonel William Momyer wrote in a 1942 memo, "The Negro pilot cannot be used in tactical units and maintain the present high state of combat efficiency." He recommended complete segregation and relegating black pilots to limited non-critical duties. Despite these obstacles, the first class of Tuskegee Airmen earned their wings in March 1942. 5 men graduated. Their commander was Benjamin Davis Jr., the same man who had previously been rejected by the Air Corps. Now a captain, Davis was the first black officer to lead an American air unit. The son of the first black general in the United States Army, Davis carried both the hopes of his men and the weight of proving their worth to a skeptical military establishment. In the early morning hours of July 2, 1943, Captain Davis received sealed orders. His unit, the 332nd Fighter Group, was being deployed to North Africa. The men celebrated cautiously. They knew they were heading to war, but they also knew they might still be denied the chance to fight. Previous black units had been sent overseas only to be assigned to construction or supply duties. "We understood the stakes," First Lieutenant Charles McGee would later write in his diary. "We were not just fighting for our country. We were fighting for our right to fight for our country." The first combat missions were flown over Sicily and southern Italy. The black pilots were assigned P-40 aircraft, decent fighters, but obsolete compared to the latest German models. Their missions were largely limited to coastal patrols and ground attack roles, far from where the Luftwaffe operated in force. Davis protested repeatedly to 15th Air Force headquarters. His men were trained for air-to-air combat. They wanted to escort bombers, the most critical and dangerous mission of all. But Brigadier General Leon Johnson denied these requests. "I have no evidence that these pilots can handle the complexities of bomber escort," he wrote in a report to General Karl Spaatz. "The risk to our bomber crews is too great." That assessment would soon be tested by the brutal reality of the air war. By late 1943, American bombing raids deep into Germany were suffering catastrophic losses. The 8th Air Force's mission to the ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt in October 1943 saw 60 bombers shot down and another 117 damaged, more than one-third of the attacking force. Without long-range fighter escorts, the bombers were easy prey for German interceptors. Something had to change. In January 1944, the 332nd was transferred to Italy and finally received new aircraft, the P-51 Mustang. With its distinctive red tail, the Mustang could fly all the way to Berlin and back. More importantly, it could outfight anything in the German arsenal. Around this same time, General Ira Eaker was replaced by General Jimmy Doolittle as commander of strategic bombing operations. Doolittle made a controversial decision. "I don't care what color a man is, as long as he can shoot down enemy aircraft," he reportedly told his staff. "The only way to prove these men can do the job is to let them try." On January 28, 1944, the Red Tails flew their first escort mission with the 15th Air Force bombers. The target was an aircraft factory near Munich. Lieutenant Wilson Eagleson was flying on Captain Davis's wing that day. "We knew everything was riding on how we performed," he later recalled in an oral history recorded in 1978. "The bomber crews didn't know we were black. All they knew was that they were being escorted by a new fighter group with red tails." German fighters attacked in force over Austria. The Messerschmitt 109 aircraft came in fast, focusing on the vulnerable bombers. Following standing orders, many escort fighters chased after the Germans, leaving the bombers unprotected against subsequent attacks. But Davis had drilled different tactics into his men. "Our job is to protect the bombers," he had told them. "Stay with the big friends." This discipline would prove crucial. While other escort groups were drawn away, the Red Tails stayed close to the bombers. When the second wave of Luftwaffe fighters arrived, they found themselves facing unexpected opposition. Lieutenant Charles Hall shot down a Focke-Wulf 190. Captain Davis damaged 2 more. In total, the 332nd claimed 3 confirmed kills without losing a single bomber under their protection. The bomber crews were impressed. They didn't yet know who their protectors were, but they noticed the distinctive red tails that stayed with them when other escorts had given chase. Word spread quickly through the bomber groups. "Those red tail angels stayed with us," wrote Sergeant John Morrison of the 461st Bomb Group in a letter home. "When we got hit by those bandits over Munich, they were right there covering our tails. Never saw anything like it. Whoever they are, I want them with us on the next mission." But not everyone was convinced. Colonel Emmett Davis, commander of the 98th Bomb Group, submitted a formal request that his bombers not be escorted by the 332nd. In a memo marked "Confidential," he wrote, "I have reason to believe this fighter group lacks the necessary experience and aggressiveness to provide adequate protection." The memo never explicitly mentioned race, but its implication was clear. General Doolittle denied the request. "Results, not assumptions, determine which units get which assignments," his response stated. "The 332nd's record speaks for itself." That record would soon become even more impressive. On March 24, 1944, the Red Tails were escorting bombers to Berlin, the most heavily defended target in Germany. It was the first time black American pilots had flown over the Nazi capital. Lieutenant Clarence Lester was flying on the wing of Captain Joseph Ellsbury. "We were at 28,000 feet. When the first Messerschmitts came in, Lester would later recall, there must have been 30 of them attacking the bomber stream. We dropped our external tanks and engaged. What followed was the largest air battle the 332nd had yet experienced. Captain Ellsbury shot down 3 German fighters in less than 5 minutes, a rare feat known as becoming an ace in a day. Lieutenant Howard Bohr downed 2 more. By mission's end, the Red Tails had claimed 9 confirmed kills and protected all but one of their assigned bombers. The bombers' gunners, watching the red-tailed Mustangs weave through the German formation, had no idea they were witnessing history being made by black pilots. At the debriefing, General Doolittle received the mission reports with mounting interest. The Red Tails had now flown 5 major escort missions without losing a single bomber to enemy fighters, an unprecedented record. Other escort groups typically lost 3 to 5% of their bombers to fighter attacks. The data was becoming impossible to ignore. Lieutenant General Carl Spaatz, commander of United States Strategic Air Forces in Europe, requested a full analysis of escort effectiveness across all fighter groups. The results shocked the senior command. The 332nd was outperforming every other fighter group in bomber protection statistics. Their kill ratio was not the highest. They were more focused on staying with the bombers than chasing enemy fighters, but their bomber loss rate was the lowest in the 15th Air Force. General Doolittle forwarded these findings to Washington with a handwritten note. The experiment has been conducted. The results speak for themselves. In the cockpit of his P-51, Lieutenant Harold Brown kept a small notebook. On April 29, 1944, he wrote, "Today we took the bombers to the oil refineries near Ploesti. Heavy flak, heavy fighter opposition. Our squadron stayed tight on the bombers. Johnson got one, I got a probable. Lost Williams to flak. His plane went down over the target, but I think I saw a shoot." These terse entries served as the only record of many missions, written by exhausted pilots between sorties. The bomber crews began to request the Red Tails specifically. A petition circulated among the 459th Bomb Group asking that they be escorted by the Red-Tailed Angels on deep penetration missions. When word filtered back to the 332nd, it boosted morale tremendously. For the first time, Captain Davis wrote in his official log, "We are being judged solely by our performance." But away from the front lines, the battle against prejudice continued. At officer clubs in Italy, black pilots were sometimes refused service. Lieutenant Andrew Marshall described one incident in a letter home that was later published in the Pittsburgh Courier. "We had just returned from Berlin, shot down 3 enemy aircraft, lost one of our own. We landed at this base to refuel and were told we couldn't enter the officers' mess. The same day, the same hour, we were risking our lives over Germany for those same officers." The most significant mission came on March 24, 1944. The target was a Messerschmitt factory in Berlin. The mission had been attempted twice before and aborted due to weather. This would be the first time American bombers had reached the Nazi capital in force. Lieutenant Colonel Davis led 54 P-51s from the 332nd. The weather was clear, unusually so for March in Europe. German radar operators had ample warning of the incoming raid. Help us spread this story. Like the video, comment if you are already familiar with this case, and subscribe to the channel. Now, we return to the point where everything changed. The Luftwaffe responded with every available fighter. Over 200 German aircraft rose to intercept. The bomber crews braced for heavy losses. The 332nd was assigned to provide close escort, flying directly alongside the bomber formation rather than ranging ahead. This tactic, which Davis had insisted upon despite criticism from other fighter commanders, was about to be vindicated. The first German attack came near Brandenburg. Messerschmitt 109 fighters dove through the formation, focusing on the lead bombers. Captain Wendell Pruitt and his wingman, Lieutenant Gwyn Pearson, intercepted the first wave. Pruitt shot down 2 German fighters in quick succession. Pearson damaged a third. The bomber formation continued without a single loss. A second, larger attack came 20 minutes later. This time, the entire 332nd engaged. The sky over Berlin became a swirling melee of aircraft. From the cockpit of a B-17, Bombardier Lieutenant Robert Williams watched in amazement. The red tails were everywhere, he later wrote in his memoir published in 1963. They weren't chasing glory like some of the other escorts we'd had. They were sticking close, driving off the Germans before they could get to us. I'd never seen anything like it. When the bombers turned for home, they had lost only 5 aircraft out of a force of 115, a loss rate of just over 4% on a mission where planners had expected to lose 20%. The 332nd had shot down 8 confirmed enemy aircraft and damaged 12 more. More importantly, not a single bomber under their direct protection had been lost to enemy fighters. Only flak, anti-aircraft fire from the ground, had caused bomber losses that day. At the debriefing, Colonel Emmett Davis, the same officer who had requested not to be escorted by the 332nd, stood up and addressed General Doolittle. According to multiple witnesses, he said, "I was wrong, General. I'd like to have those red tails with us on every mission from now on." The room fell silent. It was an extraordinary admission from a senior officer. The next day, General Doolittle issued a directive that would change the course of the air war. The 332nd Fighter Group will be assigned as a priority escort unit for all deep penetration missions. The impact of this decision was immediate and dramatic. Over the next 3 months, bomber loss rates on missions to Berlin, Munich, and other distant targets dropped by nearly 50%. Behind closed doors, the senior Army Air Forces command was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. A unit they had reluctantly allowed into combat, staffed by men many had considered inherently inferior, was outperforming every other fighter group in Europe in the critical mission of bomber protection. General Henry Hap Arnold, commanding general of the Army Air Forces, requested a comprehensive analysis of the 332nd's tactics and performance. The report, authored by Colonel Howard Turner, concluded, "The success of the 332nd appears to stem from 3 factors. 1. Strict tactical discipline, particularly their refusal to be drawn away from the bombers they are protecting. 2. Excellent leadership at all levels. 3. Superior motivation stemming from an awareness that their performance would impact opportunities for other Negro personnel." The report carefully avoided mentioning the obvious 4th factor, that the black pilots were simply skilled aviators who performed their duties with exceptional professionalism. In Washington, the success of the Tuskegee Airmen began to have political implications. A confidential memo from the War Department to President Roosevelt, dated June 7, 1944, acknowledged, "The performance of the 332nd Fighter Group has exceeded all expectations and undermines several long-standing assumptions regarding Negro personnel in combat roles." This memo would remain classified until 1972. By summer 1944, the reputation of the Red Tails had spread throughout the European theater. Bomber crews frequently requested them as escorts. A popular, though apocryphal story claimed that German pilots would avoid attacking bomber formations when they spotted the distinctive Red Tails. While this was likely an exaggeration, the Luftwaffe was professional and determined until the war's end. There is evidence that German pilots did come to respect the skill of their black adversaries. Captured Luftwaffe pilot Major Erich Schmidt told interrogators in August 1944, "We had been informed about the American fighter group with red tail markings. Their tactics were different. They stayed closer to the bombers than other fighters. This made our attacks much more difficult and dangerous." This interrogation transcript remained in classified files until 1969. The 332nd continued its exceptional performance through the end of the war. By May 1945, they had flown more than 15,000 sorties and destroyed or damaged more than 400 enemy aircraft. Most remarkably, they had lost only 27 bombers to enemy fighters while under their escort, the lowest loss rate of any fighter group in the 15th Air Force. But the story doesn't end with Germany's surrender. Despite their combat record, the Tuskegee Airmen returned to a segregated America. Captain Louis Purnell, who had shot down 3 German aircraft, was refused service at a restaurant just outside his base in New Jersey. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Davis, now a highly decorated combat commander, was denied entry to the Officers' Club at Freeman Field in Indiana. The discrimination continued even in official recognition. Of the 992 pilots trained at Tuskegee, not a single one received the Distinguished Flying Cross during the war itself, despite recommendations from their commanding officers. These awards would finally come for some decades later. The first would not be presented until 1957. In 1958, historian John Holway began collecting oral histories from the Tuskegee Airmen. Many were reluctant to speak. They had returned home and moved on with their lives, Holway wrote in his research notes. Many found it painful to recall not just the dangers of combat, but the sting of serving a country that didn't serve them equally. Nevertheless, over 5 years, Holway recorded interviews with 63 former Tuskegee Airmen. These recordings, temporarily lost in 1966 during a storage fire at Howard University, would later become the foundation for the first comprehensive account of the Red Tails. Among the most revealing was an interview with Lieutenant General Benjamin Davis, conducted in 1963. By then, Davis had become the first black general in the United States Air Force. When asked about the experiment of black pilots in combat, Davis responded, "It was never really an experiment. It was an opportunity forcibly created against enormous resistance. There was never any question in our minds about our abilities. The only question was whether we would be allowed to demonstrate them." In 1967, military historian Daniel Thompson gained access to previously classified mission reports and combat assessments from 15th Air Force headquarters. His research uncovered a startling document, a statistical analysis from September 1944, showing that bomber losses under Red Tail escort were 57% lower than the average across all fighter groups. Next to this report was a handwritten note from an unnamed general. "These numbers cannot be correct. Recheck methodology." No evidence of any recalculation was found in the files. Thompson's research also revealed that in October 1944, General Doolittle had submitted a recommendation that the 332nd Fighter Group receive a Presidential Unit Citation, the highest honor for a military unit. The recommendation was repeatedly delayed in administrative review. The citation would not be awarded until August 1945, after the war had ended, and it received little publicity compared to similar honors given to other fighter groups. The most dramatic revelation came in 1969. Aviation journalist Robert Wilson, researching a book on fighter tactics, discovered a transcript of a high-level strategy meeting held at the Pentagon in February 1944. Present were Generals Arnold, Spaatz, Eaker, and several other senior commanders. The topic was bomber losses over Germany and potential tactical changes. General Eaker is recorded as saying, "The 332nd is showing remarkable results with their close escort tactics. Some of our other groups should adopt similar approaches." General Arnold responded, "If we acknowledge that publicly, there will be political repercussions." The success of these airmen raises questions about our personnel policies that I'm not prepared to address at this time. This explosive document revealed that at the highest levels, the military leadership recognized the exceptional performance of the Tuskegee Airmen, but was reluctant to give them full credit because of the implications for segregation policies. The transcript was briefly made public, then reclassified for another decade. By the 1970s, The full story of the Tuskegee Airmen began to emerge through declassified documents, oral histories, and scholarly research. The narrative that had once been suppressed, that black pilots had not just performed adequately, but had excelled in the most demanding combat environments, could no longer be denied. Their record stood as a powerful rebuke to the prejudice that had nearly prevented them from serving at all. Perhaps the most telling evidence came from the bomber crews themselves. In 1973, the Air Force Historical Research Agency conducted a survey of surviving B-17 and B-24 crewmen who had flown missions over Germany. One question asked which fighter escort they had most preferred. Of those who expressed a preference, 64% named the Red Tails, or the 332nd, a remarkable testament from the men whose lives had depended on their protection. Colonel Harry Shepard, a former B-17 pilot with the 381st Bomb Group, summed it up in his survey response. "We didn't know they were black until later in the war. We just knew that when the Red Tails were with us, we came home." That's all that mattered in the end. The legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen extended far beyond their combat record. Their success helped break down barriers within the military, contributing directly to President Truman's Executive Order 9981 in 1948, which desegregated the armed forces. Many Tuskegee veterans went on to distinguished careers in the newly integrated Air Force, paving the way for future generations. The story of how the military attempted to suppress their achievements is as significant as the achievements themselves. It reveals how deeply entrenched racial attitudes influence policy and perception, even in the face of clear evidence. For years, official histories minimized the Tuskegee Airmen's contributions or attributed their success to factors other than their skill and dedication. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Davis, in his final interview before his death in 2002, reflected, "We were fighting two wars. One against the Luftwaffe over Germany, and another against prejudice at home. In some ways, the second was the harder fight." Davis had risen to become the first black four-star general in the United States Air Force, but he never forgot the struggles of those early days when his men had to prove not just their courage, but their very humanity. The full recognition of what the Tuskegee Airmen accomplished has been slow in coming. In 1976, the Department of Defense commissioned a comprehensive study of their combat record. The resulting report confirmed what many had long known. The Red Tails had compiled one of the most impressive records of any fighter group in the European theater, particularly in the critical mission of bomber escort. In 2007, President George W. Bush awarded the Congressional Gold Medal collectively to the Tuskegee Airmen, acknowledging not just their combat achievements, but their role in changing American society. At the ceremony, attended by surviving airmen then in their 80s, Bush stated, "The Tuskegee Airmen helped win a war, and you helped change our nation for the better. The medal is a tribute to your selfless service and your magnificent accomplishments." The story of the Red Tails remains one of the most powerful examples of excellence overcoming prejudice in American history. From an experiment expected to fail to a combat record that astonished their commanders, the Tuskegee Airmen demonstrated that opportunity, not inherent ability, was the only real barrier they faced. As Lieutenant Howard Bohr, who shot down 2 German fighters over Berlin, put it in a 1967 interview, "We didn't fly with our skin color. We flew with our skills, our courage, and our dedication to the mission. In the air, the only color that mattered was the red of our tail sections." For decades after the war, the full extent of what the Tuskegee Airmen accomplished remained obscured by incomplete records, classified documents, and institutional reluctance to acknowledge how wrong the military's initial assumptions had been. Only through the persistent efforts of historians, journalists, and the airmen themselves did the complete story emerge. It stands today as both an inspiration and a warning, about the costs of prejudice and the power of performance to overcome even the most deeply entrenched biases. Enjoyed this story? Your support helps us continue producing new documentaries. A like, a comment, or a share makes all the difference. Check out more historical cases on our channel. And if you're not subscribed yet, join our community. I'll see you in the next episode.